Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's presentation on the ROI of effective meetings between leadership strategies and lucid meetings. I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to our speakers today. On the call we have Michael Wilkinson. He is the CEO of Leadership Strategies. He's a certified master facilitator, the author of 5 books, including The Secrets of Facilitation. And from Lucid Meetings, we have J. Elise Keith. She is the Lucid Meetings founder and author of Where the Action Is, the Meetings That Make or Break Your Organization. So she's our meeting maven as well. I want to go ahead and go through the objectives of our webinar today, what you will learn, how to calculate meeting ROI, how to calculate meeting ROI, the 4 areas of organizational performance most impacted by meetings, why effective meetings are a no-brainer investment, and how to make the case for more effective meetings in your organization. A couple of housekeeping items we'd like to go ahead and mention. You do have a questions box on your GoToWebinar panel. We encourage you to put your questions in there throughout. You can also tweet at LeadStrat and at Lucid Meetings, #BetterMeetings, and we will be retweeting the ones that we think everybody will enjoy. And also just to note that all attendees are currently muted. You're on audio only, and that's just because we have over 100 people on today's call. So if you do have any questions, just enter those in the chat box. And a couple other items. Today we will be covering 2 different case studies that sort of back up the claims for the importance of having positive ROI for an effective meeting. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael for our full agenda. Michael Wilkinson.
Well, thank you, Molly. Let's walk through what we're going to be covering. First, we're going to talk about what is ROI and why does it really matter? I mean, why should we care about ROI when it comes to meetings? Then we're going to make the distinction between effective meeting and a masterful meeting. While related, they are different. Then we'll look at how to calculate meeting ROI, what it takes to achieve high ROI, and then we're going to wrap it up with, for those who want to know more, how we can help, as well as we'll have a question and answer panel at the end. So let's go ahead and get into ROI and the return on investment, what it's all about. And Elise, why don't you take it up from here?
Well, let's start with a simple definition of ROI. So ROI stands for return on investment. And basically, this is a way of describing what you get for the time, money, and effort that you put into your meetings. In the case of this discussion, we're looking to see how we can take whatever we're putting into our meetings and get more happiness, more money, more productivity out at the end. So before we take a look at how to get into that investment, let's start with a quick poll. Right off the bat, in this first poll, we would love you to tell us what percentage of your meetings in your organization do you believe return a positive value for the time, money, and effort you put into them?
So let's go ahead and open that up then. You can see that the options are more than 85%, 75 to 85%, 60 to 75%, less than 60%. And if you don't know, please feel free to take option I don't know. So we are at let's see, we're over 50% voting, but let's give it another 5 seconds here if you can get your vote in. Love to hear from you. 68%, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and close that poll. So we had 72% of the people voting, and let's take a look at the results. Elise, wow, take a look at that.
Wow. That's pretty tough.
So less than 60%, 44%, less than 60% of their meetings are really return a positive value. So we say there is work to be done. So let's get to the work.
Indeed. So let's talk about why ROI matters as we go into looking at this positive value return. Now, usually when we look at something like meetings, we tend to think about how they make us feel. And ROI puts all of that into numbers. So why is that useful? Well, first of all, taking an ROI perspective helps us establish a business case for improving our meetings. It can inform our decision making. It can show us where we need to invest more and where we should be backing off. It can help us set targets. So as we go through performance improvement programs, we have a sense of where we're starting and where we'd like to go. And finally, as we work to improve our ROI on our meetings, we have a way to benchmark our progress. But I think most importantly, when we look at meeting ROI, a lot of why it's useful is that this gives us a way to measure and value things that we otherwise wouldn't.
And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because it really says that we need to understand what value we're getting. Because we may think, oh, meetings are great, meetings are fine, when we know, in fact, meetings are actually horrible in most cases.
In most cases. So let's talk about, now that we have a sense of what ROI is, again, it's a way for us to put numbers behind our intuitive feelings of value. Let's talk about the next part of our equation, which is effective meetings and masterful meetings. So what's the ROI of our effective meetings and our masterful meetings? And these are slightly different. So effective meetings is the focus of our team here at Lucid Meetings, and we define meetings as you would a tool. So when you have any tool, you can judge whether or not it's effective based on how well it does the job it's designed to do. And we use an equation to look at that comes out of the research body, which says high PMQ plus NPI equals an effective meeting. PMQ stands for high perceived meeting quality, and NPI is net positive impact. So to put this in simpler terms, an effective meeting is one that feels like a good use of time, that gets a job done, and that gives back more than it takes out. So this bar it's a basic bar. It basically means that the effective job meeting does the job it's meant to do. May not be exciting, but it works. Now, Michael, I believe that you at least alluded that you all talk in terms of masterful meetings, which is another level beyond.
And let's contrast the two. So effective meetings is the result of the meeting, as you've heard Elise describe. We talk about a masterful meeting is the content. What's it look like? Well, we say it's a well-prepared, well-executed, and results-oriented meeting. So well-prepared, well-executed, results-oriented. It has a timely start, a decisive close, and a clear follow-up plan as key to that. So let's go to the qualities. What are the qualities of a masterful meeting? We say a masterful meeting can be broken down into 4 areas: preparation, the way it's prepared, the way you start, the way you execute, the way you close. So let's talk about preparation. So it starts with a clear purpose, products, and agenda. You're clear where we're going. You have advanced notification of the meeting. That is, you know that there's a need for a meeting. Here's the purpose and product that's going to be created. You've got the right people at the meeting, and they come prepared to execute. You have the right information at the meeting. And you can imagine, if you've ever gone to a meeting and you said, oh, I should have brought this. Well, who is the person who is best knows what needs to be at the meeting? Of course, the meeting leader. So in the meeting notice, it should be clear, here's the right information to bring with you. So that's about preparation. Let's go to the start. Of course, it is a timely start. And how many meetings actually start on time? And at the beginning, the purpose and products are reviewed. That's what you start with. And it sounds like the purpose of this meeting is when we're done, we're going to have. Then you identify the key issues, the agenda is confirmed, and then ground rules are reviewed. Notice, the meeting doesn't start with the agenda. It starts with purpose and product. Now let's get into execution. What makes a masterful meeting? Well, of course, it's a steady meeting flow as you move through. You stay focused on the discussion at hand. You have positive, energetic participation. Conflict is constructive. There are many people who try to avoid conflict, and the meeting ends, and you think because no one disagreed, that you have agreement. Of course, until the meeting ends and you have all the side conversation. So what masterful meeting leaders know is they want to pull out conflict so they can get it resolved, and you have thoughtful decision making. And then close and follow up. You have decisions and actions reviewed before the meeting ends. Here are the decisions we made in this meeting. Here are the actions that are going to be taken. You have a timely finish, a summary is provided, and you have follow-up on action. So here are these 18 characteristics of a masterful meeting, and would love to get your thoughts on which of these qualities is most often missing from your meetings. Which of them? And we'd love if you would type your answer in the question box, and we'll go ahead and share a few of the answers because we're looking at which of these is most often missing. And so taking a look, I heard that we've got several comments coming in now as to what's been missing. I've heard students talk about a timely finish is missing. Summer and David talked about the right people not present. We had several people, Myra, Stacy, and others, who talked about purpose and product not being reviewed from the beginning. We have statements about the execution being the issue. Sophia has talked about preparation and execution. Got the picture, and very well done. So we find that there are key things missing from meetings that go through the preparation, the start, the execution, even the close and follow-up. So thank you for those comments. So from here, now that we understand what an effective and masterful meeting is, take us from there, if you would, Elise.
All right, so now let's talk about how to calculate meeting ROI, or return on investment. Now, this is going to be the most in-depth part of our presentation today, and it's actually composed of two parts. We're going to look first at how to calculate the investment, or the cost, and then we'll talk about how to calculate the return, or the benefit that you get at the end of a meeting. And let's get started by looking at how to calculate that investment. So investment is a calculation that adds up all the costs that go into a meeting. And there are basically 5 areas that we can usually include in this calculation. The first is the cost of people's time. So how much time are you paying people to sit in the room? And then, of course, opportunity cost, which is how much opportunity are you missing out by having people's time occupied? The second, travel. Anybody who works in procurement understands this one. Technology. This is going to be your cost of software, your cost of video equipment, all of those kinds of things. Training. This is training specifically for meeting skills. And then finally, services. So this will be things like your secretariat services, your scheduling services, coaching, other things like that. Now, of these costs, the one that is typically far and away more expensive and larger, just absolutely eclipsing all of the others, is the cost of people's time. So we're going to focus specifically on how you get to that. When you look at calculating the employee time investment in meetings, there's a very simple formula you can use. You multiply the number of people times the average burdened rate. So a burdened rate, for those of you who aren't familiar, is what you're paying that person per hour in salary, plus a portion of all the money spent on their benefits and overhead and all of that. So at the average burdened rate times the amount of hours they spend in a meeting. So let's look at an example. In our example today, we're going to talk about a CPA firm where they have 5 one-hour meetings per week. Pretty typical. A lot of companies have way more than 5 meetings per week for their internal staff. So for 5 people at a CPA firm, the average burden rate is $35 an hour. They'll spend 5 hours in meetings. That makes it $875 per week in employee time cost, or $43,750 per year. Okay, that's a pretty typical example. Now let's talk about some of what's happening in your organizations with your leadership teams. I want to share a story about a man I met at a recent conference. We're going to call him Sam. That wasn't his actual name, and you'll understand why I've changed his name for this story in a second.
To protect the innocent.
Absolutely. So Sam, as people do when they find out that I do meetings for a living, told me his horror story. And in his previous job, he said he spent 80% of his time in meetings. He went from meeting to meeting to meeting, barely got a bathroom break in between. And he's a high-level executive in this company. He made $145,000 a year. So from an employee time investment perspective, if you look at 80% of his time and apply the burdened rate, that's an investment of $162,400 on the part of that organization. Of course, Sam never went to a meeting by himself, right? So that's just the investment in Sam's time. And my friend Sam here never had any training in effective meeting practices. He felt like the vast majority of that time was a waste. It's a huge investment with absolutely no skills education to back it. So naturally, of course, Sam quit. Now, the sad, tragic part of the story is that Sam used that wonderful salary that he had to create his own company, where very soon thereafter he found that he was creating the same exact meetings that he had run away from because he had never learned how to make them effective. the pattern was repeating. So in your handouts, there is a workbook. Workbook pages 4 through 7 give you some tools to help you calculate your employee time investment per month. So there's a lot of math here. We don't going to take time to do that now, but why don't we get a sense for how much that investment might be going awry with another quick poll?
Let's jump into that poll. We asked the question, how much time do you estimate you lose to unproductive meetings each week? Is it less than 30 minutes? About 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even more than 3 hours. And so let's just take a look. We have over 150 people on the webinar. We'll give it another 5 seconds of voting. 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's take a look at the results of that particular poll. We'll close it out and share it. Oh my, it looks like 2 hours.
Wow.
2 hours losing a week on unproductive meetings for the larger group. But if you take a look, you have 40% saying 3 hours or more. Oh my. I think they would want to see our strategies. So why don't we move on to that? What do we do about that? That would be interesting to take a look at.
You know, what's fascinating about that estimate is this is one of the ways that they evaluate waste in large organizations. And when HBR did a survey of Fortune 500 executives, they estimated they were wasting up to 8,000 a day in unproductive meetings. Now, what's fascinating about this study, beyond this figure, this astronomical figure of wasted time, was that many of the other ways in which they felt they were wasting time can also be tied to ineffective meeting practices, like unproductive conflict and employees not knowing what they're supposed to be doing.
Well said. And we've talked about the cost side, but there's even more. So we probably don't want to take the cost side, because just the cost side, because that's a trap. So don't stop there. It's really important to get into calculating the return. And so if you would, let's take us forward, Elise, as to how your organization works in calculating the return you can get.
So there are basically two different ways that we can help improve the return of our meetings, or two strategies that we can apply, and they're both familiar to you. One is the more for less. So how can we get more benefit for less investment? And then the second approach is to get more for more. So how can we invest wisely so that we can then maximize or even magnify the return that we're going to get? So let's look first at doing more for less, as this is really an easy place to start. So one of the ways you can increase the ROI, or the part of the equation, is to reduce the I, or reduce your investment. So let's go back to our example of our CPA team that had 5 one-hour meetings per week. So that at 1 hour left them with a cost of $43,000 plus a year. Now, if they take those meetings and they just shorten them to 45 minutes instead of an hour, that will save them nearly $11,000 a year by just making that one simple change. And who here wouldn't like to spend $11,000 less to get the exact same result?
Nice, I can see that, and that's simple math. It makes sense. But let's get into the effectiveness piece. Let's talk about effectiveness and how that can be done as well.
Yeah, let's, because that becomes much more interesting, doesn't it? So one of the first and simplest approaches you can take to making your meetings more effective is to do more effective scheduling. Given our 1 hour meeting example, again, this is a really common and also a really ineffective way to schedule those meetings. Because every time you have a meeting, you're incurring not only the cost of the meeting itself, but also what we call task switching cost, which is typically, people estimate, somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes when you stop doing whatever you were doing before and then switch over to doing your next task. So in this case, with these meetings, we end up with 10 task switch penalties added on to the meeting time itself. The other way in which this is really ineffective scheduling is, if you can see here at the bottom near the check-ins and the breaks and whatnot, we've created all of these little tiny bits of time that can't really be put to use for other productive work. So one of the first ways you can improve the productivity of your meetings is to schedule them in a way that they don't waste all of this other time around them. For example, if you are in fact a CPA firm and you make your money by meeting with clients, if you schedule all your meetings to first thing in the morning, the rest of your day is free to focus on meeting with clients or doing actual productive work. And then if you want to take that another step, this is a tactic called time blocking, where meetings are centered into a single day. So you work from meeting to meeting to meeting. It reduces task switching time. So we've gone from 10 task switching penalties in that first example, and now we're down to 4. And it also allows you to schedule your meetings in a way that takes advantage of some of what we're naturally better at in the afternoon and in the morning. This is the tactics that we use.
Yeah, I'd love to give an example of what we do at LSI. Because we have people who travel working with clients, we have a meeting day once a month. Literally, the meetings start at 8, and the varying people are involved. I happen to be involved in all 6 of them. So there's a meeting at 8, there's a meeting at 9, there's a meeting at 10, there's a meeting at 10:45, there's a meeting at 12:15, and there's a meeting at 2 o'clock. And they're all in the same room. So literally, I stay in the same room the entire day as people come in and out, switching out into those meetings. And so they're designed to minimize what you call my task switching time.
That's right. You get yourself into meeting mode, and this can extend across your entire company. When you are in meeting mode for the day, your meetings aren't interrupting other work. Your meetings are your work for that day. So that's one way to help increase the productivity of the meetings and their impact on the rest of the schedule. Now, that's just about moving the time around. This is just still kind of an effective use of math. When we talk about wanting to maximize the ROI of productivity, what we're actually interested in doing is maximizing our productive output of our main work. So in our case, we write software, we write books. That's how we want to measure our productivity. And to do that, you need to design an effective cadence of meetings, not just an effective day of meetings, but what are the kinds of meetings you need to have and how often do you need to have them so that the right information is getting to the right people at the right time with the right frequency. And that frequency, that part of that cadence, not only improves the ROI or the productivity of the meetings themselves, it can also help you prevent productivity hits that you get when your meetings are ineffective and everybody has to talk by email or all kinds of other wasteful ways of communicating afterwards. This is an example of a leadership team meeting flow model. It's an optimized meeting cadence. It happens to be one of the most popular downloads, the guides associated with this on the Lucid Meetings website. And we hear from leaders from organizations all the time about how incredible the impact on their primary productivity has been by putting this kind of cadence in place. So they tell us they love it, they're more focused and productive, and that's not just about the meetings, that's about their productivity as a team overall. So, wrapping up on this focus on productivity, there are several strategies you can apply to improve the meeting ROI when it comes to productivity specifically. First, you can run shorter meetings. That's going to reduce your time invested, you're going to spend less and get the same return. You can use time blocking, which gives you more productive time available to do other work. Same cost, but a potential benefit in increased productivity. And then finally, you can adopt an optimized meeting cadence. This takes extra work. It's the most advanced technique, but also by far the most rewarding, both reducing your cost and increasing your productivity. So that, of course, is our winner. Leading us to a poll.
So why don't we ask the question? Yes, we'll watch it. Which of these productivity-focused strategies do you already use today? Which ones do you use today? You can select all that apply. So shorter meetings, time blocking, optimizing the meeting cadence. But if you would be frank, if it's none of the above, please indicate none of the above. So again, indicate as many. Which of these are you using today? So we'll keep the poll open for another 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and close out the poll now. Let's take a look at the results as we close out that poll, and we'll see that 46% are doing the shorter meetings, 41% time blocking, 15%, which is a great opportunity for people, optimizing the meeting cadence, and their 30% are doing none of those. So these are great strategies that some are using, but others can benefit from using as well. So
Great.
Back to you.
Well, and I think that does in fact point to a really great opportunity, because shorter meetings can in fact backfire if you're not getting the result you need. So there's a workbook, pages 8 through 12 will help you evaluate some of your other meeting productivity habits. And with that, why don't we finish up on productivity? And Michael, let's talk about revenue generation and impact.
Okay, so we talked about the cost side, and that's important to decrease cost. But there's also opportunities to get revenue generation and impact on the meetings as well. And so let's talk about sales as effective sales strategies and using sales meetings. So what do you do differently if you want to have an effective and masterful sales meeting? Of course, the preparation, professional preparation is key. And then the engagement, the strategies you use to engage the clients in the conversation. Making sure that you're clear and respectful on their use of time, that you're asking permission for, and you're really getting clear. So this will take 15 minutes, it'll also take 20 minutes. We actually have one client who tells the story that he knew something was different when we first met. We got clear on the purpose and the product that was going to be created. And then I asked him, so according to us, we have about 30 minutes, is that right? And he said, yes. And I pulled out the clock and said, well, let's go ahead and use the clock. I'll set it for 25 minutes, so we have 5 minutes at the end. And then, of course, the effective follow-up and follow-through, the meeting notes as a part of that, and then having a process for continue refining what you're doing, refining what you're talking about as you go through. So what's that all mean? I'd love to get to this quote from McKinsey where they say performance can vary by as much as 6 to 7 times between top and bottom tier sellers. What's that mean? That if a sales position is a position, it's the effectiveness that's important. And the difference between a salesperson who has low effectiveness versus one that was high, McKinsey has shown that it can be 6 or 7 times difference between the two. So the more we equip our people with those kinds of skills, the better. So what's it look like? Let's talk about the ROI of these revenue generating practices. So as an example, is if you're using effective strategies in the sales meetings or new business meetings, how do you measure the success? Well, of course, it's new revenue being generated. So the ROI, you expect to have increased revenue coming directly from that work. As well, you can have more effective client and partner meetings. And what that look like? Repeat business as we go through. And again, once more, increase revenue. So from the first strategy, you get new revenue. From the second, you get repeat business revenue. Let me give you an example from our own experience. This is early in our company's history. We've been around for 26 years now. But in that second year, working with a software company who were sending people to our classes. And of course, budgets got tight, and the director of consulting services wanted to eliminate the training program. Well, the person in charge of the training program had already had the reports and showed that the difference in the scores that clients gave to consultants before they took the class and then scores for those consultants after they had taken the class, the difference was significant to the point that not only did they not decrease their investment in training, they actually increased it and wanted to get all their people trained in the skills. So huge difference, and just one organization, and you can imagine if you can get revenue generation opportunities, it can make the difference. Back to you, Elise.
So in your workbook, you will find on pages 13 to 15 some examples of how you might calculate the return potential of increased revenue. So if you train your salespeople and your customer-facing people in these practices, what happens if they close just one new deal more than they would have otherwise? Or if they increase the value of the revenue they're bringing in by just 1% to 5%. You can work through our workbook and it'll help you calculate what that ROI potential might be. Okay, so we've covered productivity and revenue generation. So let's look at the third of the 4 areas of organizational performance that's most impacted by meetings, and that's employee engagement and retention. Now, there's this fabulous study done by Willis Tower Watson where they looked at 41 global companies and they identified what they called the characteristics of high sustainable engagement. It basically breaks down into 3 main things. First, you empower employees. So that means that the jobs make good use of their skills and abilities and that they have a way to be involved in the decisions that affect their work. Second, teamwork and cooperation. Teams work together to produce wonderful results, and there's good cooperation between departments. Finally, leadership practices. So the management style within the organization encourages employees to give their best and expresses support and interest in the well-being of employees, basically showing we care. So we're not going to stop for a poll here, but I want you to think and consider, what are some of the ways that meetings contribute to sustainable engagement? How can you see that your meetings might either add to or detract from your organization's success in those areas? And while you're thinking about it, let me share what the research shows. There's actually a fair body of academic literature on the effectiveness of meetings as business drivers in organizations. And one study found that meeting satisfaction had a direct impact on overall job satisfaction. It's statistically relevant and a practical indicator of satisfaction. Another found that the quality of the meetings an employee has with their manager has a dramatic impact on both engagement and retention. And retention is one of those areas where there's an enormous ROI benefit to be made if you can keep your people longer. You keep well-trained people longer, you don't have to pay to replace them. So in the academic literature, they identified the meeting characteristics that directly contributed to high engagement. And it creates this sort of model of the path of coefficients that I think looks a little bit like a Star Wars X-Wing of meeting awesomeness.
Yes.
Yeah, but it essentially breaks down to 3 core practices, and that is the manager makes sure that meetings are relevant to the employees that are involved, that they use the time wisely. So we've already looked at some of the scheduling opportunities. Time management is incredibly important, and that every employee gets a voice. They have a chance to speak up. Again, this is about engagement and participation. So that's what they say takes to make an engaging meeting. So why bother? What's the ROI benefit overall? Well, that same Towers Watson study found that organizations with high sustainable engagement outperform their sectors 18% in earnings growth, 5% in gross profit growth, and 7% in total assets growth. So this practice of running engaging supportive meetings with your employees has a magnificent and dramatic impact on top line ROI performance. And what's more, the converse is also true. If your engagement is low, you will perform 3 to 13% below your competitors. I think that's pretty compelling.
Very compelling.
So in your workbook, you have on pages 16 to 18 an opportunity to look at and evaluate some of your own practices and see, are your meetings engaging? Are you expressing support for your teams or not? So with that, we've talked about engagement and revenue and productivity. Michael, let's talk about decision quality and velocity.
As you can imagine, in a masterful meeting, quality decisions are important, and getting them to them quickly is also important. So what we find, if you want to ask, are you getting the quality and velocity that you're looking for? 3 questions in particular. Does the group actually make the decisions you need to make? Oftentimes, meetings end without a decision being made at all. Do you make the best available decision? So are you having the discussions where you are creating alternatives in groups and come to what those are, the best of those alternatives? And do you make decisions quickly enough to maximize the result? Are we spending all this time in endless debates that go round and round and round? Or are you moving the discussion through a process where you get to a decision relatively quickly? We say with Masterful Meetings, you get better decisions, often faster, with higher level of quality of commitment to implementation, because the people engaged in impacted by the decision are involved in it. And so, to use a quote from Bain and Company, they said, we found that decision effectiveness and financial results correlated with 95% confidence level or higher. And it didn't matter what the country was, the industry, or the company size and the sample. What's that mean? Well, if you take a look at decisions on one end and how effective a decision was and the financial results, those two things are correlated highly. So as you get to better decisions, as we'd all would expect, you get better financial results. Well, let's move forward then as we're going on. Let's talk about the decision quality and velocity, giving an example of where it comes from. I spent 8 years as one of the big 8 consulting firms in the U.S., and we would bring executives and groups together. In our early days, we would do interviews individually with groups, and we'd come up with what we call the 100% solution. And we'd present it, and then we'd go away, because good consultants go away. We found that when that happened, we'd come back a year later, and at best 15% was implemented. In my last 2 years with that organization, it was a different story. Instead of us doing the study and coming up with solutions, we would convene their team, facilitate their team going through our process, having them coming up with the answers. Now, when they came up with the answers, quite frankly, they might get only to the 60% solution. And we would float ideas, oh yeah, that'll work, or another idea, oh yeah, that's great. Some things they wouldn't accept. They may only get to the 85% solution. But when we go away and come back a year later, 80% would be implemented. The key question is why? And I suspect you know why. In essence, because they created it, they bought in. And we used to formulate ED equals RD times CD. This comes from Dr. Robert Zawacki at the University of Colorado. The D is the same word, decisions. Effective decisions equals, get this, the right decision. And in my words, you put a period there. If you want a decision to be effective, it's got to be right. But he said, no, it's the right decision times commitment to the decision, which means, think about it. If you have a team leader who comes up with the right decision, but there's zero commitment, what's the effectiveness? Zero. Or if you know what a customer should do and the customer is not willing to do it, how effective is it because they have zero commitment? It's zero. And so, unfortunately, what most of us do is we create the right decision first, then try to build commitment to it. We say a much better strategy is to do R&D and CD at the same time. Get the people impacted by the decision, involved in the decision making, getting them in the room. And so that gets you to better quality and better velocity of decisions. Just to get a quote from our friends at Amazon, Jeff Bezos put it this way: speed matters in business, plus a high velocity decision making environment is more fun too. So creating a masterful meeting environment makes all the difference in the world.
He looks like he's having fun.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Often the case.
So let's talk about some of the effective decision-making meeting techniques and how you can measure sort of the ROI of that. So to begin with, the first, where you will start off is you'll just document the number of decisions you have. Simply writing them down increases the chances that they'll get implemented. So that's your expected ROI there, is better follow through. After you've got them documented, the next strategy is to make sure you're clearly identifying the need for a decision in your regular meetings. Now, when you call something out as like, this is a decision we need to make, and you're writing them down, the time between your identification and your decisions getting made should go down. That's an increase in decision velocity. And finally, and this part gets to what Michael was just talking about with the effective decision-making process, it's training and identification in the use of effective processes. So most high-performance organizations have methods for scoping, identifying, and running through different kinds of decisions, which they educate all of their staff members in. And in that case, you see not only an increase in velocity, but also an increase in decision quality across the board, which, as we discussed earlier, is correlated at 95% with your financial performance. So in your workbooks, you'll find on pages 19 to 21 some surveys that will help you look at your existing decision-making practice and identify places where you may wish to make some improvements there. So now we have covered all 4 of the areas for increasing performance. And before we move on to the next section of the presentation, let's take time to just do a quick check with another poll.
Here we go. We'll make this very, very quick as we want to save time for your questions. What we'd like to ask is, where would your organization benefit most from more effective meetings? Is it increased productivity, increased revenue and impact, increased employee retention and engagement, improved decision quality and velocity? Select just one where your organization would most benefit. And again, we'll give it another 5 seconds here. 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's take a look. Over half the people voted on this one. And as we take a look at the results, 18% said increased productivity, 11% increased revenue, 27% increased employee retention, but look at this, 44% improved decision quality and velocity is where they could most benefit from, Elise. And so that's as an area for focus.
And that's a fabulous observation, very wise on the part of our audience, because truly, if you're not making a quality decision up front, nothing else is really going to fall out from that that's going to be good, is there?
Very much so. So let's go from there then and talk about where we go forward. It's our agenda, if we would. So we talked about how to calculate meeting ROI, effective meetings versus masterful meetings, and what is ROI and why does it matter. Let's now talk about what it takes to achieve high ROI. And so we'll look at the organization meeting performance maturity model. Go for it, Elise.
All right, so this is a tool that we use in our practice at Lucid Meetings. We have a model that helps track how well an organization uses its meetings to achieve its results. It's a pretty standard performance maturity model. It starts at level 1. So the kind of ways that you would go about improving your ROI very much depend on where you're starting. And at level 1, the organization isn't really doing much to help make meetings go well. It's really up to you as an individual to be successful. And therefore, the strategy that you use as a level 1 organization is get yourself some mad meeting skills. So if you were on this call and you were part of a level 1 organization and you cannot help your whole organization move, get yourself some training. That's the way to go. Now at level 2, the organization establishes some fundamental standards. They learn how to do things like keep meetings to reasonable times, document their results, and we're getting into that basics of effective, respectful meetings. And in that case, the place to focus is to manage the investment. So you're keeping a tight eye on how much you're spending, keeping meetings short, not allowing meeting bloat and metastasized cancerous meetings to take over your time. At the next level, people start to get into that optimized cadence. They start to look at what specific kinds of meetings we need to have to make our business go. And in that level, you look at improving your ROI by getting much crisper about how to make decisions, about how to run different kinds of calls. So how do you run that sales call? How do you run the call in your team to increase engagement and whatnot, and defining patterns. Now, usually this level 3 effectiveness happens first at the team level. So your product team may adopt Agile, for example, or your leadership team may adopt something like the flow that we showed earlier, which then, once you've got these kinds of practices established at the team level, you can start to look at how to spread that across the organization. And that's the systematized level, where they have a harmonized practice that you can see repeated and repeatable from across different teams and across different parts of the organization. This is where you can start to apply things like templates, automation, and other kinds of systematized ways to reduce the investment and maximize your result. And then finally, at level 5, the organization has really got a lock on the importance of meetings and uses those to promote their culture and their results. At that level, they're always continually maximizing ROI because that is the level at which an organization is focused on continuous improvement. And to help explain or give a picture of what that looks like, that level 5 sort of performance, I'd like to share a little bit about Zingerman's. So this is a level 5 case study, and I wrote about them in more detail in my book. So if you want to learn all about their practices, you can go read that. Zingerman's is a community of businesses, and that means that they're basically a cooperative with a bunch of different businesses. They have a deli and a roadhouse and a candy shop and a mail order and an ice creamery, and it's kind of a fabulous place to visit if you want to go watch meetings because they feed you fabulous things. And the picture I'm showing here is a picture from one of their weekly huddles that they hold at their new Korean restaurant. So the huddle is one of their core practices, and it's part of what helps drive their performance. They have fabulous profit growth year over year. They're expanding and adding new businesses every couple of years. And their employee retention rates are industry leading, which is really quite stunning given that they are a food service business. Part of the way they achieve that is through this huddle. So the huddle starts with an icebreaker, and everybody goes around and gets to know each other, and then it goes through a review of the performance numbers, and then it ends with appreciations where people take time, and actually a lot more time than you would think, to express their appreciation for something other people have done that day or that week. Now, what's really stunning about these meetings is not the icebreaker or the appreciations, those are lovely, but it's how they look at the numbers in the middle. While they go through their performance numbers, it is not managers who are necessarily going down these lines, it's the employees. The employees are responsible for individually reporting on revenue, net promoter score, costs. They each have direct ownership over the financial results and the performance of their organization. So as we talked about before, you can see how that's an incredible employee engagement strategy. Every one of the businesses in their community runs a huddle. They also have defined meetings for making decisions. They have strategic planning cadence. And on top of that, they have training that they offer to all of their staff. So everyone in the company has an opportunity to get trained in effective meeting practices. And for those who are interested, they offer free facilitation courses for any staff member. They do this not because it's just lovely and they enjoy meetings so much, but because it helps them develop a very rich leadership bench in their entire company. So they are always growing new people to come in and drive their performance forward. We talked about some of the strategies that Zingerman's uses. Michael, what are some of the other strategies you've seen be successful in your work?
And so in my book, The Secrets to Masterful Meetings, Elise, we talk about 7 success factors in particular. And so these 7 things, if you're looking to transform the meeting culture for the entire organization, 1, it's got to start at the top with gaining support from your leadership team. Then establish a baseline to say there is a real need there and we now see being able to measure improvement. Communicate a vision of what a masterful meeting is, using those 18 characteristics that we talk about. And then here's key, empowering every individual to actively participate in eliminating bad meetings. We use something called meeting rights, like the Bill of Rights, that if you attend a meeting, you have certain rights. Then, of course, having meeting rights without skilling up people is not empowerment, it's just anarchy. So we have to skill up people by providing vehicles for improving skills. Then, of course, monitoring, communicating progress, and then finally, rewarding success. 7 keys to, if you're trying to transform the meetings throughout your organization, we believe all 7 are critical in making it happen. So we have covered all of our agenda, but how we can help in Q&A. So let's go back and take a look at our objectives. First, we wanted to show you how to calculate meeting ROI. Let's check that off. That was done. We wanted to talk about 4 areas of organization performance. Yep, we've talked about productivity, new business impact, employee engagement, decision quality. Done. We said we wanted to talk about why effective meetings are a no-brainer investment. Hopefully that's become clear. And then finally, how to make the case. So let's talk about making the case in your organization. Could you start with that, Elise?
So at Lucid Meetings, we do offer solutions to help people adopt these kinds of practices. And the case is made by looking at the information you've had so far and being able, using that workbook to calculate some of your opportunities for improved ROI. Then, depending on where you are, if you wish to work with us, we help folks put systems in place that make that ROI sustainable. Our solutions include things like our platform, so the Lucid Meeting software, which helps people with meeting management, agenda management, performance measurement, and records retention. We do offer education, templates, and guides. If you haven't been to our website before, I invite you to check it out. There are over 40 free agenda templates with guidebooks showing you how to be effective at different kinds of conversations. We do offer workshops. We have half-day workshops and multi-day workshops teaching people how to adopt a successful engagement practices in team meetings overall. So we do not train people to become facilitators. We teach people to operate successfully within your day-to-day business meetings. And then finally, we have our master program, which is the Effective Meeting Results Program, which starts with an assessment of where your organization might be on that maturity model, and then helps design a solution that advances you and helps achieve the kind of ROI goals that you've identified are going to be most impactful for your organization. Now, your services look different, yes, Michael?
And they do, because as you focus on ROI, we're focusing on skilling people up in the transformation piece. And so it depends. You can do it at the enterprise level, department level, or actually a bottom-up approach. Enterprise level says, hey, at the very top, we want to get agreement on what are the problems with meetings, what are the skills that are needed, what's the approach we'll take, and the benefits for doing that. So we do all this through an executive briefing where the executives say, hey, and it's typically the COO or the CFO or the CHRO, the Chief Human Resource Officer, who's saying, we got to change this. Different from that's at the department level, where you would have a department head saying, the meetings in my department, we have just got to get better with that. And we would address that through specifically on-site skills training. We may pilot with a private training class, the Effective Facilitator, or our course facilitating Masterful Meetings and documenting the benefits of doing that. Different from that, there may be individuals in an organization who recognize there are challenges. And so they may take a bottom-up approach where they're getting individually trained in our public classes. And once more, the Effective Facilitator and facilitating Masterful Meetings. And again, documenting the benefits so more people then are encouraged to take advantage of it. So whether it's enterprise level, department level, or bottom up, 3 different approaches, and we have the resources that can help you there. Which really
I took the Effective Meetings Facilitator class, I think 4 years ago from you, and I found it invaluable for helping shape the meetings that drive our business.
I love that plug. Thank you. You know what? Let's go ahead and launch that final poll for you, because we'd love to get your answers to the question, which of these options interest you? We're going to leave the poll open. As we're doing that, once you answer the poll, if you would, so let's go ahead and open. Would it be like to be contacted about classroom training for a group? And please check all that apply. Contacted about classroom training just for yourself or for some other individual. Contact me about hiring a facilitator for a meeting event, given that you're looking for someone with masterful meeting skills for strategy, issue resolution, action planning. Contact me about assessing my team's meeting performance. And so Elise's team can come in and really assess where you are and put together a plan for improvement. Then, or if you may have a different need, we'll be glad to contact you about a different need. Well, let's go ahead and oh, by the way, if you, by answering this poll, you'll also will get the slides from today's session, and also a link to the recording, and then a couple of articles from me and from Elise on running masterful meetings and making your meetings effective and computing ROI. Well, with that said, we'll leave the poll open as we move into our Q&A. And so if we would, if you'd go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So we've got some great questions that came in here. I'm going to go ahead and call these out for both Elise and Michael. We'll start with you, Elise. We've got a great question here from Dimitri. It's a good way to calculate the ROI for every meeting, but we have a lot of different meetings a week, and I spend a lot of time working on my calculations. Is there a good tool to calculate this? I think that's best for you, Elise.
So meetings in general versus meetings specifically in terms of return on investment. If you're looking for meetings in general, the workbook and the accompanying Excel worksheet have a way for you to inventory all of those meetings and calculate investment that way in aggregate. So that's part of the workbook. Calculating ROI is another step where you're looking at return. And for that, one of the practices we use in our assessments is we take that same inventory where we've got a list of all of our meetings, and we identify, well, what kind of meeting is this, right? So is this a decision-making meeting? Is it a problem-solving meeting? You know, what's the function of this meeting, and is it achieving that function? And is there another more effective or efficient way that I can achieve that function? Now, the challenge, of course, in your question is that the correct strategy for improving any meeting is going to be specific to that meeting. But it starts with that inventory. So I would look at that part of the workbook and start there.
Great. Thanks, Elise. Question for Michael now. Well, we've kind of got two that kind of go together. So the first question was from Dimitri also. What's the best way to force people to prepare for a meeting? And then somewhat related, we have a question from Muhammad. How to convince the leader of the organization that a meeting is a good investment. So really, I think the crux of that is gaining that buy-in.
Gotcha. And the training and so on and working on meetings is a good investment. Thank you. So let's go to Dimitri first. You said the best way to force people to prepare. And love it. We try not to use the force word. How about let's talk about influencing? And it's interesting because there are different things that help. For me, I recognize I'm CEO of our organization, and I can mandate certain things. To get a meeting on my calendar, the person who does my scheduling, it's required that he has to have the meeting purpose and product for the meeting, that has to be in the meeting invite, or you can pretty be sure I'm not there. So it forces the person preparing for the meeting to know that and to provide that information. What's the purpose of the meeting, and when can we leave? When we create it, what product? And so in order to convince people that training and other resources are worth the investment, these kind of providing the workshops or the information from this webinar on how organizations are performing based on making effective use. One of the things Elise did is she ran several calculations for you, and here's a summary. If you have people just spending a group of 15 people, a department of 15 people spending about 13% of their time in meetings, just a 10% increase in the effectiveness of that meeting, of those meetings, is like adding a whole nother person to the department. That's the productivity. You can add a person just by making meetings more effective.
Wonderful. Yeah, and then did you need that follow-up?
Yeah, I've got both of those. Thank you.
Sure, wonderful. All right, another question for either of you. I feel that it's important to indicate the expense involved with meetings because the employees' other tasks aren't addressed, and that came from Larry. So I guess we'll go back to Elise if you want to give your weigh in on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think calculating expense is useful because it gives you a way to gut check yourself on whether that's an expense you're spending in a way that you'd like to spend it. Now, it's a little bit of a trap, as Admiral Akbar told us, because the reaction you tend to get is that either people go, oh my gosh, we're spending so much money in meetings, we need to cancel all the meetings, what a terrible waste, which is not going to help you increase your effectiveness. Or the other side of the trap is people go, yeah, whatever, that's salary time, you know, don't bother me, and they fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. So you have to pair a look at expenses, which I absolutely advocate you have, with a look at the potential benefit or business value driving potential in your meetings.
Great. And Michael, if you have any last thoughts on that, we're just about out of time.
You know what? I just saw David's question for both speakers. What are the most important barriers to overcome in implementing an organization, a culture of excellence in meetings? And David, I'd love to give you just a quick answer to that. And Elise, please feel free to follow up as well. But just wanted to say, we do a quiz at the beginning of our classes, just 10 questions, true or false, of is this a best meeting practice? 60% or more of the people don't even score passing, because most people think a bad meeting is good. And so what we do is that we find the barrier is, one, people don't know how bad meetings are. And two, and this is the most important, David, people think their meetings are fine. It's other people's meetings that need to get fixed. And what we try to convince people of is, you know what? Most people don't know what a great meeting looks like. And so going to the chief operating officer or department head to say, let's transform all of our meetings, tends to make a difference.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Just want to end on a next steps note. The presentation is being recorded and the video will be shared with you tomorrow via email. The slides will be included in that follow-up. We've got some other great content for you there, so be watching for an email from webinars@leadstrat.com. Be sure to check out Lucid Meetings at lucidmeetings.com/meeting-ROI to learn more about Lucid Meetings. And finally, visit leadstrat.com/contact-us to learn more about leadership strategies, workshop, and facilitation services. It's been a pleasure hosting you during our live presentation today. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.
Thank you.